Hi everyone, so today I'm talking all about one of my favourite subjects, PCOS, with Melissa Groves. So Melissa is a specialist in women's health and she takes the focus off diet and weight loss and hones in on key nutrients by taking away restriction and not eliminating any foods or food groups to help normalise periods, remediate PCOS symptoms and optimise fertility. She also addresses the root cause of PCOS, such as insulin resistance, inflammation, hormone and gut imbalances with food. In her new book, which is out tomorrow, it's called A Balanced Approach to PCOS. Melissa uses a functional medicine, food-first approach that combines holistic and lifestyle changes with evidence-based medicine. So it's set to release tomorrow, August 25th, 2020. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing food and nutrition in a lot more detail. So her thoughts on food sensitivities and allergies and whether they're a big factor in her clients, things like blood sugar regulation, what that actually means, and the importance of the individual macronutrients, proteins, fats, and fibre or carbohydrates, particular nutrients to pay attention to for proper hormonal balance. Melissa's thoughts on fasting or time-restricted feeding for those with PCOS, organic food, whether it's worth the extra money in her opinion, and whether she believes that plant-based, vegetarian or vegan diets are a good or bad idea. So lots that we cover in this episode. I'm excited to check out her book as well because my clients are always asking me for more recipes, and with some individuals, a restrictive diet isn't the best. I think that's for everyone. It should be as broad as possible, but there are some people who have certain conditions or food sensitivities where they have to limit themselves a little bit. So if you're someone who is just wanting to eat healthier and find recipes that your family can also eat and enjoy as well, I think this might be a great resource for you. So the links will be in the show notes for more from Melissa. You can find her on social media at the Hormone Dietitian. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Hi Melissa, I want to welcome you to the podcast. I'm so excited to chat all about PCOS, one of my favorite subjects, with you today, and on the subjects of nutrition and PCOS, because you have a brand new book out tomorrow. So we're going to dive into different subjects and answer some frequently asked questions from my listeners. But before we get into that, could you tell me a bit about your story? I don't think I'm familiar with kind of your journey, how you got interested in PCOS. Is this a condition that you have been diagnosed with personally?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm excited that we got the chance to chat. And no, I don't personally have PCOS. I definitely have struggled with other hormone issues throughout my life, but PCOS is not one of them. How I first got into PCOS was I was working in the practice of a functional medicine dietitian. This is a second career for me. I went to school the first time around and I worked in New York City advertising as a writer for 15 years. And then I went back to school to become a dietitian. And my first job out was in the office of a functional medicine dietitian. And she sent me every client who wanted to lose weight. So when you're working from a functional medicine perspective, you're looking for that root cause, because I would look at what they were eating and how much they were exercising, and I was like, something is not adding up here. Like, why are they not losing weight and gaining weight on this diet they're following? And what I would turn up through the deeper digging in the form of testing is that there was almost always some sort of hormone imbalance that was preventing them from losing weight. Either their cortisol was high, or their insulin was high, or their thyroid was low, or they had this condition called PCOS, which I didn't really learn anything about in school. And so when I started learning about what PCOS is and how complicated it is, I got really, really interested. And I also felt that, conventional medicine was not serving women with PCOS well at all. They were basically being told to lose weight or eat less or move more, or here's the birth control pill, and come back when you want to get pregnant and we'll give you fertility meds. And so I felt there was really a need in the market for someone who could help these women identify their root causes of their symptoms and, get improvements, because you can't lose weight if your hormones are imbalanced. So that's why I focus on the root cause piece as opposed to the outcomes piece. So when I opened my practice, I decided to focus exclusively on women's health and primarily on PCOS, but I do work with other hormone conditions and fertility as well.
So what do you see are some of the main root causes of PCOS?
It's so funny. I actually just launched a new quiz. So it's what's your root cause, and you answer questions about your symptoms, and it calculates, which is your primary root cause. And I'm seeing about 52% are getting insulin resistance as their main root cause, followed by the hormone imbalances, which is about, a quarter. That doesn't mean if you have insulin resistance, you don't have hormone imbalances, but it calculates which one's your primary root cause. So really those are the main ones. Inflammation, I'm definitely seeing that. And then it's pretty rare that the gut imbalances are the primary root cause of someone's symptoms, but I am seeing a few come up with the gut being really the primary cause. It's very common, and there's a lot of gut imbalances inherent in PCOS that we end up working on. But yeah, it's been kind of cool because I'm getting the real-time results of the quiz to see, what's going on with the people who follow me, at least.
That's so great. I'm going to take the quiz myself, and I'll include the link in the show notes because I'm intrigued. I do have PCOS, and I feel like I have all of the different causes, but I know that inflammation is probably the main reason for me. But yeah, just intrigued to see what the results will say. And you're right that they can all cross over. You can have multiple, but you have to kind of work step by step. And having gut issues and having dysbiosis and imbalance of good bacteria in the gut can actually drive insulin resistance. So they are all interconnected. So with
Absolutely.
PCOS,
I mean,
yeah,
so I was going to say, similarly, you see posts all the time about what type of PCOS do you have? Do you have adrenal or insulin resistance? I don't think I've ever really seen anyone fall neatly into one category only. There's a lot of overlap there as well. I mean, sometimes if I'm working with someone who has lean PCOS, they really will kind of fall into that adrenal only category. But for the most part, it's a combination of factors.
Agreed. I totally see that as well. And you can say that with any condition, really. There's never just one root cause. Take migraines, for example. There might be one thing that you need to focus on, put your focus on mostly, but it could be a hidden food sensitivity, lack of sleep, lack of hydration, mineral imbalances, and all of these things kind of add up. So there's never just one thing. So I'm glad that you made that point. Do you feel like PCOS symptoms can be reversed completely, or is it a condition that we just learn to manage?
I think, obviously the condition never goes away. You're always going to have those tendencies, like towards insulin resistance, for example. So, you can reverse the symptoms to the point that you are clinically normal on blood tests and you're not having symptoms that you're noticing. But I think, the tendency is always there. So if you stop doing whatever you're doing to get those things under control, then it can just bounce right back.
Absolutely. So let's now discuss some of these dietary subjects in a bit more detail. And I've kind of made a list of things that I get asked. You probably get asked the same questions all the time. And there will obviously be more information in your book. But let's start off with food sensitivities, food intolerances, and allergies. So I've had to block certain accounts online because it really infuriates me. People saying, oh, just cut gluten and dairy out your diet and that's all you need to do, you'll be healed. I do work with people who have like true food sensitivities, and it is a driving factor. Sometimes those sensitivities can be temporary while we're working on their gut health and promoting insulin sensitivity again. But where do you stand with food sensitivities? Are they a big deal for your clients, or do you find them not to be like a huge puzzle piece?
I don't find them to be a huge factor for the majority of my PCOS clients. I agree with you. It's highly individual. Whether gluten is going to cause inflammation in someone depends on, whether they're intolerant to it or, like you mentioned, the state of their gut. If their gut is not in good shape, then they're going to be having more sensitivities to food than they would be if they had, a really solid gut barrier going on and they weren't getting exposed to those antigens from the food. That being said, people do have very valid food allergies, sensitivities, and intolerances. I mean, I actually fall into the allergic to casein category. So it makes me very sad. I like cheese. I miss cheese. But the immediate reaction that I get when I eat cheese is just far too much for, I know it's not good for me to be sneezy and wheezy and covered in hives. So I'm able to get results for my clients without cutting any foods for the most part. The one time I will do, kind of deeper digging is if the gut's just not healing with the kind of basic gut healing protocols, or if their inflammation is remaining high despite switching to a more anti-inflammatory diet, then we might look to see, is it something that you're eating every single day that is causing inflammation for you? Because it's really hard to tell. I mean, you can go by the list of, the big 8 that people are most likely to be allergic to, but it takes a long time to get there. It's like, okay, well, let's try, gluten, and then let's try dairy, and let's try eggs, egg whites, and, peanuts, and sort of work through the list that way. But it's trial and error if you do it that way. So that's when I'll test to see.
And most people have intolerances or sensitivities, don't they, as opposed to an allergy. Most people know if they have an allergy because they've had it since childhood or they have obvious symptoms. So am I right that you would go mainly off lab tests and how things are improving kind of with a more well-rounded balanced diet, or are there any symptoms that would make you start to think of a hidden food sensitivity?
Yeah, so like you said, with a food allergy that's a true IgE immune mediated allergy, there's going to be immediate and, potentially life-threatening reactions to that. With a sensitivity or an intolerance, that's a little bit different. I actually think the reason why most people start to feel better when they cut out gluten, for example, is not because of the gluten itself. Gluten is a protein, but the foods that contain gluten are high in fructans, which is a fermentable carbohydrate. So when you cut that out, it's like suddenly they are having less bloating and their digestive system feels better, but it's not about the gluten at all. It's actually about the fructans. Some red flags for me for gut stuff and food sensitivities are skin reactions. That's always a big red flag for me. If someone has sort of persistent eczema or psoriasis or something like that going on, rosacea, something that's, because your gut is your primary detox organ. So if that's not functioning well, all those toxins have to come out somewhere. So your skin kind of takes over. So if we're seeing that, like, those kind of symptoms that aren't going away, that's when I'll question, if there's something deeper going on with gut and food intolerances.
I'm sensitive to dairy as well. I wish I could handle cheese and milk because there are some health benefits associated as well. And it's just quick and easy food to consume. But there's certain camps as well who are like, you can never drink dairy. It's full of hormones. It's going to mess with your hormones and growth factors and estrogens in there. What would be your kind of response to that?
Yeah, so I do caveat dairy in PCOS with, if you're having dairy, you should have full fat dairy. I actually think that low fat dairy is one of the worst things you could do with PCOS, because the estrogens, the female hormones, are stored in the fat in the milk. So when you skim that off and you just leave the liquid, it only leaves the androgens, which are water soluble. So you're basically just pouring more androgens onto a situation that's already imbalanced in androgens. And the studies on dairy, with fertility especially, show a benefit with full fat dairy for women. That being said, I really don't think that anybody should be consuming the American recommendations for dairy, which is 3 glasses of milk a day. But I don't think most people need to sweat, a little bit of cheese here and there, or a yogurt here or there. And like you said, it's one of the most convenient sources of quick protein that you can grab. So when you're taking that out, it just leaves you with fewer options.
And what about organic with both dairy products, meat, animal protein, and produce? Because with my clients, I usually do start my clients off on a bit of an elimination diet. So I'm cutting out gluten and dairy just as a 30-day kind of reset, just to see how things are. But then we do a reintroduction. We start with organic kind of goat's milk, sheep's dairy, to see how they tolerate those first, because they're probably less likely to be allergenic. And I always give the caveat that ideally it should try to make sure it's organic, just for the welfare of the animals. And also the nutrient profiles are a lot better with organic. But what are your thoughts on that? There's, again, some people who are like, everything needs to be organic because these pesticides are hormone disruptors. They're going to kind of wreck your gut bacteria. So I'm guessing you're kind of somewhere in the middle on more of this balanced plan, but give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's a personal decision for sure. I'm very fortunate and privileged to be able to prioritize that in my life. That I may not make a super extra effort to buy organic everything in the produce department, but when it comes to humane treatment of animals and quality animal proteins, that's where I do spend the extra money to get. I actually prioritize grass-fed or local over certified organic. I have friends who are local who own a bison farm, for example, and they're not certified organic because it's just too expensive for a small farm to do. But I can drive by their house and see the bison out eating grass in the field, and there's some pretty happy, well-treated bison. So I feel really comfortable with that. That being said, I never force my personal choices onto my clients, and especially not in my recommendations on my platforms, my social media platforms, and my books, because not everybody has that option. And I think when it comes to PCOS, based on the most common root cause, the most important thing when it comes to a diet for PCOS is blood sugar balance. And in order to do that, you need to have adequate, high quality protein. And so meat, eggs, dairy are one of the quickest sources of that, and the best used by our body. So I would rather have them have, conventional animal products if they can't afford organic. But when it comes to the nutrition profile, I do prioritize grass-fed over organic. it could be organic corn fed, and that's going to be higher in those inflammatory omega-6s versus grass fed, which has more of the anti-inflammatory omega-3s. But when you're actually looking at animal products like meat, the difference is really marginal in the amounts. I really tried to get them to prioritize fresh and not processed, that kind of thing.
And I'm really big into increasing my clients' protein intake as well, because either people aren't eating any protein at a meal, or so they're just having a piece of fruit for their breakfast. I know there's like minor amounts of protein in there, or they're eating not so great types, so more of the processed types of protein, like the Beyond Burgers. They'll spend however much on those things, but I'd rather them get some organ meats that cost a few dollars, or some eggs, some pasture-raised eggs. Do you have any thoughts on the more plant-based vegan types of proteins versus animal proteins, so vegetarian versus omnivorous diets for PCOS women?
Yeah, I find a 100% plant-based diet very difficult to achieve the protein levels that I recommend for blood sugar balance. It's possible, but you're going to be adding a lot of things like pea protein and hemp seeds to your foods to get to those levels. I totally agree with you. I see a lot of, what I call kind of junk food vegetarians who are eating, do you guys have Morningstar there? Morningstar is a really big brand here, and it's all like soy protein isolate.
Well, we might do. I don't go down those kind of aisles in the supermarket, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's similar to the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger. They're filled with inflammatory fats and food additives, and they're not real food. And like you said, when you compare them price ounce for ounce, the organic ground beef is actually much cheaper compared to a processed Impossible Burger. So yeah, I get questions a lot about, well, what can I eat if I'm vegan, and do you recommend it, and why don't you include more recipes in your course and your book that are vegan? I do have some plant-based meals in the book, mostly breakfasts. But I would rather they eat at least a little bit of eggs and fish, seafood, if that's an option for them. And I understand there's some religions, especially, that prohibit animal products. And I actually was a vegetarian or a pescatarian for a really long time. But, at a certain point, you have to decide whether you're going to put your health above anything else. And, that's kind of what happened when I started eating meat again, was I had to decide that my health was more important than, my feelings about a particular topic.
Mm-hmm. And are there any minimums or maximums in terms of grams of protein? I'm not big on like counting macronutrients or anything like that, but I know that some of the listeners are, and they need like a rough guide. How much should they be shooting for every day?
Yeah, I generally recommend using a plate sort of model where half your plate is made up of non-starchy vegetables, 1/4 of your plate is protein, a concentrated source of protein, and 1/4 of your plate is a starch or a carb. In terms of grams, I have my clients shoot for 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal, or around 8 to 10 for a snack. To get them to the level. Most people do great with dinner. A lot of people do fine with lunch for the most part. Where they really fall short is breakfast. And that's the meal that sets the tone for the whole day. So often, just working on that and increasing protein consumption at breakfast is, what makes the biggest difference for how they feel throughout the rest of the day in terms of cravings and energy.
Yeah, the breakfast is the most important meal in my opinion, and it really influences how your body responds to the other meals as well. So if you start off on a bad foot, then despite what you're eating, your blood sugar may be like crazy ups and downs. And if you're experiencing like the 4 p.m. slump, that's very common, it may not be that you didn't eat enough at lunch. It probably is your breakfast or your sleep the day before. So always kind of look back and see what may be playing a role, especially if it's kind of common and it's a daily occurrence.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have PCOS, and if I were to eat pancakes for breakfast, I would just be, basically screwed for the rest of the day. I would just want pizza, and then I would want nachos, and then I would want cookies, and it would not be a good day.
That was me. I used to have either toast in the morning, or I'd have a big bowl of oats, and then I was like, oh, I'm being so healthy. I'm eating my whole grain toast, I'm eating my oatmeal, and then an hour later I was absolutely ravenous. I'm like, oh, it must be that I have a fast metabolism and I'm just one of those constant grazers. But when I swap that to a higher protein, higher fat breakfast, lower in carbs, I could go 5, 6, 7 hours without even thinking about food. So that just shows. Mm-hmm. And people making that one change, they're like, oh my God, you've changed my life. Like the first recommendation Absolutely. You made, you're like, oh, I don't need you anymore. Everything's good.
Yeah, no, that's where I start them too. And that's actually the basis of the book, is my protein, fat, fiber method. We actually don't talk about carbs at all in the beginning with my clients or in my course. I just want them to, no matter what they have on their plate, they have to add protein, fat, and fiber. And then, as we're working together and they really get the hang of that, because that, once they get that one thing and they master it, it's like everything is so much easier. And then we tweak it, as we're working together longer, because carb tolerance is so individual. Some people do better with a little more carbs. I've had clients who weren't eating carbs. They were having a salad with fish or, turkey for lunch. And we add a little bit of quinoa and suddenly they're, have all this energy. I'm more like you. I'm more the opposite, where if I had a bowl of oats in the morning, I'm done for. I just want to go back to bed.
So how does someone find their carb tolerance? Obviously, your courses and your book will give a better explanation, but from what I just heard, you start off on a lower, depending on the person, but mainly a lower carbohydrate diet, and then you try and increase until you notice weight gain or negative symptoms. Is that right?
It's more, I have an experiment with the amount and the timing. So we start with that plate method as the starting point, where try to keep your starches to a quarter of your plate on any given meal, and then we kind of will increase that, whether that's a half a cup for someone or it's up to a full cup. We'll play around with that. We'll play around with try having starch at breakfast versus not, and see how you feel. Same with lunch. On the other hand, I'm the type of person, if I don't have a starch with dinner, that's for sure. Those are the nights when I'm like, do we have ice cream? Yeah. And I'm scrounging in the cabinet. So
or you wake up at 3 a.m. unable to go back to sleep. That's another one.
Yeah, because you're hungry. So we really play around with that. And there's so many things that affect how many carbs you need. Like you said, how much you slept the night before, where you are in your menstrual cycle affects how many carbs you need. Whether you exercised yesterday or not, it all impacts what you need to stay satisfied the next day. So yeah, it's individual and it kind of changes day by day. I always say men are like, every day is Groundhog Day for them because their hormones are on a 24-hour cycle. But for us, it's different depending on what day of the month it is.
Totally. And what are some of your favorite starches or carbs to recommend?
Yeah, I love beans for PCOS, any sort of legumes or beans. There actually are some studies on the benefits of legumes in PCOS. They help balance blood sugar. They're a nice, slow digesting carb. They're high in fiber. I think those are one of the best choices you could make. The more you can incorporate slow whole grains, potatoes, root vegetables, that kind of thing. But I also tell clients not to, really sweat the occasional fun carb choice, or I have clients who just culturally grew up eating white rice, and that's what they prefer, and it's what they are used to, and it's fine as long as they have that protein, fat, fiber on their plate to slow down the impact of that carb.
And how do you balance those things? So eating for enjoyment and socializing versus trying to get your hormones under control and prepare for pregnancy or deal with a concurrent autoimmune condition as well, because there is that fine line, isn't there?
Yeah, so I look, when I think about a healthy diet, I think about the big picture. So think about the fact that you get 3 meals and 1 to 2 snacks a day times 7. So when you're looking at a week, like how many of those meals conform to that protein, fat, fiber method? How many treats did you include? I talk about when it comes to sugar. I use the World Health Organization recommendations, which is 5% of daily calories can come from added sugars. So I kind of refer to that as your sugar budget for the day. So on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, you get up to 25 grams of added sugar. So that's a little bit of wiggle room, and you can kind of decide how you want to, spend that budget over the course of the day. You can have a little treat with lunch, or you can have a little dessert after dinner, or you don't have to worry about the 3 grams of sugar in the salad dressing that you like, those kind of things. On the other hand, if you're looking at it from that perspective, it's like one Starbucks drink can blow your budget for 2 whole days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a choice. You get to decide how to spend it. I do strongly believe, I grew up in an Italian family, so food is, paramount. Food is how you love someone in an Italian family. So I, very strongly believe that we should have things that are traditional to our families and holidays and things like that. The problem is when every day turns into that holiday.
Yeah, good point. So the third component of your blood sugar meal would be the fats, and I'm a lover of healthy fats, and I've found that those on a low fat diet often have wacky hormones that are all over the place. So how does the fat that we eat affect our hormonal health, and why is healthy fat so beneficial for PCOS?
Yeah, so we actually need fat. We need cholesterol in order to make hormones in the first place. When it comes to choosing fats for PCOS, we try to focus on the anti-inflammatory fats, the ones that are higher in omega-3s, or olive oil, avocados, avocado oil, nuts, basically those Mediterranean type of fats, salmon, sardines, those are all really beneficial fats for PCOS. What we try to limit are those inflammatory omega-6s. So the processed vegetable oils, things that are used to fry foods in restaurants, that's the kind of fat that should be avoided. I do think there needs to be a certain amount of natural saturated fat, but not overdoing it when it comes to PCOS. Like, I don't think coconut oil is a health food by any means, and especially not when it comes to PCOS, but I don't necessarily recommend, eliminating it. It just should be part of a range of fats that you include daily.
And for what reason is that? Is that the studies that show the increase of LPS or endotoxin?
More so the ones that show its impact on cholesterol, which it's already, dyslipidemia is already common in PCOS, and coconut oil can raise LDL, which usually we're already looking at an imbalanced cholesterol profile in someone with PCOS.
When you were saying as well, trying to eat locally and eat what your ancestors ate. Like, I'm in the UK, there's no way we were getting coconuts even 50 years ago. Like, we're now just eating like coconuts and avocado and bananas and pineapples shipped from Peru or wherever. So we should be eating, like, kind of in my area, the butter, the ghee, the dairy products, things that we would have had access to.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention that when we were talking about dairy. Is I really find that ethnicity is more important than anything when it comes to determining how well someone's going to handle dairy. And people whose ancestors are from Northern Europe do much, much better on dairy than someone like me from, Southern Europe or, Africa or Asian countries. They tend to not do as well with the lactose portion of the dairy.
And
but
I
for you
recently did
guys,
my
I mean,
genetics. Yeah. And it showed that
so,
I had it's actually a genetic mutation, isn't it, that allows you to continue to digest dairy. So I actually have the genetic mutation, meaning that I'm one of those people who should be able to tolerate dairy into adulthood. That said, I can't at the moment because my gut's a little bit messed up, and but that's a good sign that hopefully when I address all these things, that might be something I can reintroduce. So genetics aren't everything, but they give good insights.
yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I feel like, with the genetic piece of things, we're still in the beginning of understanding what it all means. And, just because you have a gene SNP doesn't mean it's expressing itself either.
So the next thing I want to talk about is calorie counting and macronutrient tracking. So I'm going to lump them together because I don't really do either of these with my clients, but I understand again that some people like to come from that side of things, especially if they're working out, want to make sure that they're eating enough, or recovering from something like hypothalamic amenorrhea. They need to make sure that they're eating enough food. So do you use these in your practice? What are your thoughts on calories? Do we need to pay any attention to them, or can we just eat healthily and our weight will just regulate on its own?
Yeah, so I don't recommend tracking calories. I just, as someone who, I was a dance major the first time around in school and was very conscious of calories, I still have, the library in my brain of being able to look at a food and know exactly how many calories it has. I just think it's time spent better elsewhere. It actually takes a really long time if you are tracking. I'll do it for an experiment occasionally, or I'll do it, I'll recommend it with my clients. Like you said, if I suspect that a client's actually not eating enough, I'll have them track for 3 days just to kind of see. But it's very time consuming to find all the foods and enter them incorrectly. And I think that time is better spent taking a walk, or, taking a nap, or doing something that you find enjoyable, rather than obsessing over numbers. Calories are, the calories in, calories out is old science. It only works in the context of a laboratory, not in the context of a human body that has hormones and bioindividuality. So I just don't recommend it. If weight is an issue, we can't pretend that calories don't exist, and even healthy foods. So I do kind of recommend with things that it's easy to go overboard on, that's where you want to kind of portion it out for yourself. So something like, for example, nuts. It's really easy to eat 800 calories of nuts if you're just sitting there with the bag open. So if weight's a concern, then you might want to portion those out, put them in a little bowl, pair them with something else so that they're more filling, because those are a really concentrated energy source. In terms of macros, again, I don't have people count. When you do the plate method, it kind of comes out to be a very balanced approach. So, the studies on, quote unquote, low carb diets in PCOS, when you look at what they were actually eating, it was around 40% of their calories coming from carbs. So I feel like 40% is not actually it's not a keto diet. It's not a very low carb diet. I think that's a reasonable approach. So, when you're balancing your plate and your plate method, it kind of automatically sorts out to be that around 40% carbs, at least 30% protein, 25-30% protein, and then the rest from fat. So, really do try to approach recipes and meal planning from that balanced perspective. It's like, okay, do I have enough of each of these things?
Great. And what about fasting or time restricted eating? So that's a big trend at the moment. There are also health benefits associated, increased autophagy, immune support, obviously resting and allowing the digestive system to heal and repair. So women with PCOS are obviously jumping at that because they think, oh, it may help with weight loss, it may help with insulin sensitivity, but I've seen it as well become more of a stress and a strain on the thyroid and the adrenals. Have you seen the same?
Absolutely. I will say probably more than half of my clients come to me not eating breakfast. So if intermittent fasting were going to work, it would have worked, right? There's a couple things. I do think, obviously the science is emerging on the benefits of fasting in terms of especially longevity and aging and, the ability for the cells to clear debris and, prevent cancer and all of those things. And, there is the research on insulin, resistance improving with fasting as well. I don't recommend it to women of reproductive age because our hormone systems are so sensitive to scarcity that, it can actually damage us. And like you said, there's also that component where it adds stress. We have, tons of studies, with the Muslim population who fasts for Ramadan every year, there's studies showing that the cortisol remains elevated for months after that 40 days of fasting. So it's, if you have an adrenal component to your PCOS, fasting is not going to do you any favors, and it's not going to do you any favors when it comes to your sex hormones. And, there are some animal studies showing actual ovary shrinkage in mice who were fasted. So, it's like, I think it's not a good thing. I don't know. I don't really work too much with the post-menopausal PCOS population, but I do wonder if maybe that might be a place where you could play around with it if you're not in a place where you're in a high stress situation. But I mean, so many of us are we just live in a high stress situation. So I don't know, if you want to move to a cabin in the woods and try intermittent fasting, sure, maybe. I also think that people are doing it wrong. I think that our bodies were meant to eat with the sun. Our circadian rhythm should align with the sun. So we should eat when we wake up first thing in the morning with the light. We should stop eating when it gets dark, and that should be our time. I don't consider, if you eat dinner at 7 p.m. and then breakfast at 7 p.m., I don't consider 12 hours a fast at all. I think once you start going beyond that, then that's considered, fasting. But yeah, I don't recommend it.
Totally agree. And probably 50% of the women that you said who don't have breakfast, I bet their energy isn't great. Then they just think, oh, my body will just create energy from thinner. They're like, why don't you just try having breakfast? Maybe that will help.
Absolutely. And I also, as a follow-up, I get the question all the time because women often are not hungry when they wake up. And so they have trouble getting breakfast in. And, I would say, look at your coffee consumption. Are you drinking too much coffee and that's blunting your appetite? I would look at how late you're eating at night. If you're not waking up hungry, there's a lot of things you can do, and start small with incorporating breakfast and build from there. But just get eating in the morning. It's one of the best things you could do for your PCOS.
And they will find after a while that appetite does come back, but adrenaline, what is released when you're fasting, it probably makes you feel good. It gives you a bit of a buzz, but that is also suppressing your appetite. So it's tricking you a little bit into thinking everything's fine, but then you crash later on, or your period that month is really long and all over the place. So that's why people think that they're doing fine without breakfast, but when they start to add it in, they're like, oh my God, this has changed my life.
I know, it's a game changer.
What I want to talk about lastly is the term like superfoods, or is there any particular nutrients that women with PCOS should pay special attention to?
Yeah, so superfood, I feel I must say, as a registered dietitian, superfood is actually a marketing term. There's no definition of what a superfood is. In my book, I include what I call PCOS power foods. And what those are foods that have some evidence that it helps with some aspects of PCOS. So, for example, cinnamon, there's a lot of studies that show that cinnamon can help lower blood sugar after a meal. So incorporating cinnamon may help, lower your blood sugar over time. I don't recommend supplements. It's, something you could easily add to your food, and the amount that you have to add is not a lot. Foods like ginger that are potent anti-inflammatories have that extra benefit for PCOS. Going back to the gluten thing, barley is actually a PCOS power food, because that's another one that's got a lot of studies showing how powerful it is at lowering blood sugar, to the point where it's recommended that diabetics who are on medications not eat barley, because it can, lower their blood sugar too much if they're on medications. So, there are foods that can, affect hormone balances, inflammation, insulin resistance, and then also, the gut health. So eating fermented foods that have live probiotics in them, eating lots of fruits and vegetables that have prebiotic fibers in them to feed your healthy gut bacteria. Those are all, PCOS power foods that, again, we kind of do it in stages when I'm working with someone. It's like we start with protein, fat, fiber, then we get them eating breakfast, then we kind of, tweak their carb tolerance, then we start adding these foods that actually may have an impact on PCOS. Spearmint tea is a big one too, that can lower testosterone. So, so I include all of those things in my book, but these are all things you can include in a healthy, balanced diet easily.
I like that phased approach as well, because that allows it to become more of a habit and a lifestyle rather than a 30-day diet plan that you perfect and do amazingly well, and then you just go back to eating the junk that you were previously.
I always tell people, would you believe that my busiest month in my nutrition practice is actually February? Because everyone went on a crazy diet in January, and then basically hit February 1st, ate everything in sight for 2 weeks, and then decided I need to do something else. I need to figure out a better way. And that's when my phone is ringing off the hook, when people are like, okay, clearly my cleanse or my, Whole30 or my keto didn't work. So there has to be something else.
So I want to finish up with just a few more questions about you personally and how you stay healthy. So the first one is, what's your go-to breakfast? And maybe there's a recipe or an idea that's in your book that you want to share.
Yeah, so I basically have two. I try to think as little as possible in the morning. It's like I just need to grab it and make it happen. So if it's warm out, like now, I'm generally going for a smoothie. My go-to smoothie is non-dairy milk, a protein powder, a frozen fruit, usually blueberries. Today it was mangoes. I'll add some flax seeds, and then I'll add some fat, which is either nut butter or lately with the quarantine and, pantry foods, I've been freezing avocados before they go too bad. So I'll grab like an avocado quarter and throw that. My other go-to breakfast is a veggie egg scramble. So I usually start with actually frozen cauliflower rice, and I saute that with olive oil, and then I throw in whatever veggies are in the fridge. So could be peppers, could be kale, could be anything, and then I just scramble some eggs in. In the book, I have a lot of my favorite kind of breakfasts for when I'm working or I'm on the go, which are things you can eat with one hand in the car. So things like egg muffins, or there's a lot of high protein, high fiber muffin recipes in the book that you can grab and go. But there's a separate section. There's a bonus smoothie section as well. So if that works better for you, you could do that as well.
Great.
Those
Yes,
are really
smoothies. Smoothies are my go-to as well. Just an easy way to get a ton of things in, easy to digest, quick and nutritious, which is what I love. Is there one food, herb, nutrient, supplement that you just couldn't live without?
Oh, it's kind of a toss-up between avocados and sushi that contains avocados. Actually, we haven't done takeout since March, since the stay-at-home orders, and I'm really missing sushi right now. And the avocados is hard too, with the timing, with trying not to shop too often. It's like I either have none or I have 5 ripe ones at a time. I have been buying those little individual guacamole packs to kind of get me through the times when we have no avocados.
And avocados are tricky as it is. Like 1 minute they're perfect, the next minute they're brown. So yeah, it's a struggle. The struggle is real.
Absolutely.
Really is a first world problem though, I must say.
And again, like I'm in New England, so if they're not local to me, I really wish we could have an avocado tree in the backyard. I could just walk out and get them, but
I wish that was the case here as well, but that's not going to happen. We have apple trees. Maybe we can have more apples. What's one thing that you do daily to stay in hormonal harmony?
I really prioritize sleep. I have to say sleep is I've found sleep to be the biggest factor when it comes to my own hormone health. So I'm pretty religious about it. I'm in bed by 10 p.m. at the latest. We actually have a rule with my husband. He's not allowed to ask me any questions after 10 p.m. Because it gets me too stressed. And then I try to, get up when I wake up naturally, which is usually, between 6 and 7. So that one thing is really what I focus on the most.
Great. And then last question, Melissa, is where can people find more from you online? And tell us a bit more about your book.
Yeah, so my website is thehormonedietitian.com, and I do have a lot of articles there about PCOS. They can also find me on Instagram. It's the .hormone.dietitian on Instagram. And then the book is being released tomorrow. I'm super excited. It is called A Balanced Approach to PCOS, and it is 16 weeks of meal plans and recipes for women with PCOS. So there's a little bit of background information about the root causes and how this way of eating addresses those root causes. And then the recipes are organized by season. So there's 4 weeks for each. So winter, spring, summer, fall. Each week has a featured protein, fat, fiber, and PCOS power food. So you can prep ahead if you want to, or you could just, pick 1 or 2 and cook them. But if you wanted to prep ahead, the recipes use similar ingredients so that you can minimize your cooking time and shopping. And then there are some bonus recipes as well. I mentioned the smoothies. There's also snacks and desserts, because you do need a PCOS treat every so
Absolutely.
often.
And I love that whole concept of the seasonal eating, the meal prep aspect. So it sounds like you've like put so many things together, and it's probably what your clients have been asking for years. And my clients know that I'm not the best at formulating recipes. I just outsource to other recipe books and things. So yours will be one of the main ones that I'm going to refer to from now onwards, because I just say, just focus on the proteins, fats, and carbs. I just give them a list of foods, but they're like, please, we need like good recipes. I'm very basic. I just have like my meat, my vegetables, my fats. But some people, they want to make the recipes and they miss that from what they were eating previously. So I think you've solved one of my problems, and yeah, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. It's really funny. When I first started my website, I thought, I needed to do these fancy recipes for people. And then I was just realizing, the more you work with people, it's like people are not cooking. People don't have time to cook. So once I made the switch to like, oh, here's a sheet pan dinner you can make in 20 minutes, it's so much easier to do that kind of thing. And myself included, I don't have an hour to spend making a recipe on a weeknight. So I'm all about the quickest way to getting healthy food in my mouth, basically.
And they're also very family friendly as well, because some of these PCOS plans that I see online, it's just like a boring salad and you have to cook separately to your family and eat different foods. So it sounds like it's very adaptable.
Yeah, I should mention, each week I have a tip on how to increase the carbs, for example. So like when I was cooking them for myself and my, husband, who obviously does not have PCOS, I would double the carbs for him. So there's guidance in each of the weeks on how to do that. Or if you're someone who's super active and you need more carbs, so there are tips and tricks in each week, how to make each week. If it is a week that contains gluten, how to make it gluten-free, how to make it dairy-free, etc.
Perfect. And am I right that it's available in all regular places, Amazon? Is it in, obviously, it's a little bit of an issue with the book kind of shops at the moment. Is that right?
Yes. So I believe Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and IndieBound, and I believe as of August 25th, the digital copy will be available for people who like to use their tablet in the kitchen for cookbooks as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to link to all of those things in the episode show notes for everyone to check out. And thank you, Melissa, for your time. It's been great connecting with you. And I appreciate you spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge on PCOS.
Thank you so much.